By 6:14 a.m., Mara Ellison already knew two things. The car across from her house had been there all night, and someone inside it was watching her front door. She did not guess that. She knew it. Because when her kitchen light came on, the shadow behind the windshield moved. Not a stretch, not a driver waking up. A quick pull back, like whoever sat in that car did not want to be seen seeing her. Mara stopped in the middle of the kitchen with Owen's lunch bag still open in her hand. The peanut butter jar sat uncapped by the sink. One slice of bread was already going stale on the plate. The school permission slip she had forgotten to sign lay under the fruit bowl beside 3 soft bananas and a grocery receipt. Inside the house, everything looked normal. Outside, something was wrong. She moved closer to the window without thinking. Across the street, under the maple tree near the curb, the dark blue sedan sat exactly where it had sat at 10:19 the night before. Exactly where it had sat at 1:42 when she woke from a bad dream and checked the blinds. Exactly where it had sat when she stood in the dark at 4:51, telling herself not to be ridiculous. Now it was morning. Still there, still angled toward her house, still quiet enough to let her imagination do the rest. Behind her, 11-year-old Owen dragged his backpack across the floor and called out from the hallway that he could not find his blue socks. Mara did not answer right away. Her hand tightened around the lunch bag so hard the paper crinkled. The windshield was too dark to see clearly, but she could feel it. The attention, that fixed, patient feeling of being measured from a distance. Mom Owen's voice came again, louder this time. "Top drawer, left side," she said. Her own voice sounded almost calm. That bothered her more than panic would have. She had learned a long time ago that the most dangerous moments did not always arrive loud. Sometimes they arrived quietly enough to make you doubt your own nerves first. That was how Daniel used to do it too. Not with shouting, not with fists, with quiet lies, quiet omissions, quiet shifts in bank accounts, quiet explanations delivered so gently that, by the end of the conversation, Mara was the one apologizing for having noticed. 3 years divorced, and she still hated how quickly her body remembered that kind of confusion. She reached for her coffee, took a sip, and realized it had already gone cold. Then the driver's side door opened. Mara froze. A man stepped out slowly, tall and broad through the shoulders, wearing jeans and a brown jacket that looked slept in. He stood beside the car for 1 second and rolled his neck like his back hurt. Then he glanced at Mara's house. Not by accident. Not the vague sweep of someone looking around a neighborhood, a direct look, quick, controlled, familiar with hiding itself. Mara stepped back from the window on instinct. The movement was automatic and humiliating. She hated herself for retreating in her own kitchen. By the time she looked again, the man had opened the passenger side, leaned in, and spoken to someone inside. Someone smaller. Someone who did not get out. The cold spread through her so fast it felt chemical. Owen appeared beside her with one sock on and one in his hand. "That car again," he said. Mara moved in front of the blinds without even meaning to. "Go finish getting ready." He frowned. "Why?" "Because I said so." The sharpness in her voice surprised both of them. Owen looked up at her, hurt flickering across his face. Mara hated that too, hated that fear had entered the room before breakfast and already touched her son. She crouched slightly and softened her tone. "Sorry. Just get your shoes on, okay?" He nodded and went. Mara waited until his footsteps disappeared, then pulled the blind aside 1 inch. The man was back in the driver's seat. The second shape remained still, She grabbed her phone and took a picture through the glass, then another, then one more. In all three, the car looked smaller and less threatening than it felt in real life. That was the problem with proof. Sometimes it flattened the danger until you looked dramatic for having felt it at all. She almost called the police. Almost. Instead, she stood there in the pale kitchen light, barefoot on cold tile, and argued with herself the way women like her had been trained to do. Maybe someone got lost. Maybe someone slept there after a fight. Maybe it had nothing to do with her. Maybe she was letting an ordinary thing turn into a private theater because Daniel had burned the wiring in her instincts and she still had not fully repaired it. She hated that thought most of all. That even now, after everything, her first reflex was still to question herself before questioning the stranger outside her home. At 6:31, the passenger side door opened. This time, the second person stepped out. A girl, 17 maybe, thin. Dark hair twisted into a loose knot. Gray hoodie, leggings. White sneakers dirty at the toes. She stood beside the car for a moment, stiff from sleeping upright, then lifted her head and looked directly at Mara's house. Not at the neighborhood. Not at the mailbox. The house. Like she had driven there for that one reason and had spent the night gathering nerve. Mara's throat went dry. The girl raised one hand halfway, not waving, not signaling, just stopping midair like her body had moved before her courage caught up. Then she lowered it, got back into the car. Mara did not move for 3 full seconds. Then she crossed the kitchen in a rush and locked the side door even though it was already locked. She checked the front, then the back slider, then the small pane beside the mudroom bench. By the time she turned around, Owen was watching from the hallway with his backpack on. "Mom, what is going on? Nothing." The lie came too fast. Owen kept staring. He had Daniel's eyes, not Daniel's expression, just the eyes. Mara usually lived with that fact. This morning it made her skin prickle. "Is it because of that car?" "No," she said, then corrected herself. "I do not know." That was the truer answer. He shifted his backpack higher. "Are they bad people?" Mara looked at her son and felt a sharp, private stab of anger at every adult who had ever forced her to perform calm while something was clearly wrong. "I do not know that either," she said. He nodded once, serious now. "Do you want me to stay home?" The question nearly broke her. "No, you go to school. I'm just being careful." He accepted that because children had no choice but to accept adults even when adults were guessing. At 6:40, she walked him to the bus stop. The air had that wet morning cold that got into sleeves and made every sound travel farther. A dog barked somewhere behind the next row of houses. Sprinklers clicked weakly across the street. Mrs. Haskins, from 2 houses down, stood at the corner in her robe under a long cardigan, one hand on her cane. Before Mara even spoke, the older woman leaned in and said quietly, "That car been there all night." Relief and dread hit Mara at once. So she was not imagining it. "You saw it too. Honey, I saw it at midnight, still there when I woke up at 3. Owen looked between them. Maybe they are waiting for someone. Mrs. Haskins gave him a soft smile. Older women saved for children and fools. Maybe. But not like that. The bus came with its usual groaning brakes and flashing lights. Mara kissed the top of Owen's head and made herself smile until he climbed on. He turned once before disappearing inside. The moment the doors shut and the bus pulled away, Mara's smile dropped. Mrs. Haskins watched the car cross the street, then looked back at Mara. "You calling somebody?" Mara should have said yes. Instead, she heard herself answer, I want to see who gets out next." Mrs. Haskins studied her face for one long second. Then she said the sentence that slid under Mara's skin and stayed there. "Be careful, honey. People love calling a woman dramatic right before they find out she was right." Mara said nothing, because that was exactly the part of it that hurt, not just fear, recognition. She walked back to her house with the cold biting her ankles and the empty bus stop behind her. Halfway up the front path, she looked again at the sedan, and the windshield gave nothing back, but she knew the girl was still in there, waiting. For what, Mara still did not know. Only that whatever it was had already found her door. Mara had barely closed the front door when her phone rang. Daniel. 6:47 a.m. He almost never called that early. For a moment, she simply stared at the screen. Across the street, the blue sedan still sat under the maple tree, engine off, windows dark. The girl inside had not moved again. Mara answered. What Daniel's voice came through low and careful, the same tone he used in court hearings and parent-teacher meetings. "I drove by your street a few minutes ago." Her stomach tightened. "You drove by, yes. Why?" He ignored the question. "There's a car outside your house." Mara looked through the blinds again. "Still there?" "Yes," she said. Another short silence, then Daniel asked something strange. "Did anyone get out?" The question landed wrong. Too specific. One man earlier, she said why he hesitated. Then he said, "You should not go near that car." The way he said it made the back of her neck prickle. Not concern, not curiosity, warning. Mara leaned against the kitchen counter. "Why just trust me on this?" That sentence had been his favorite tool for years. Trust me. Right before every lie. She felt something cold spread through her chest. "Daniel, what do you know who is in that car?" "No." Too fast. "Then why are you telling me not to go near it?" "Because it is weird. You just said you drove by." "Yes." "Then you saw it." "Yes." "Then why are you asking me what I saw?" Silence. The quiet stretched just long enough to wake the old instinct she hated. The instinct that noticed patterns before explanations arrived. Daniel finally spoke again. "Just call the non-emergency police line if you feel uncomfortable." "If I feel uncomfortable?" Mara looked out the window again. The passenger door of the sedan opened. The girl stepped out, thin, gray hoodie, dark hair pulled back loosely. She stood beside the car, staring directly at Mara's house again. The same look, not curiosity, recognition. Mara felt a sudden drop in her stomach. She spoke slowly. "Daniel, what? There is a girl in that car." He did not answer. 17, maybe, Mara continued. "She has been sitting there since last night." Still nothing. Mara turned away from the window. "Daniel." "Yes." "Do you know her?" "No." The word sounded wrong even before it finished leaving his mouth. The same tone he used years ago when she asked if he had opened another credit card. The same tone when she asked why their savings account had dropped by $8,000 overnight. Calm, controlled, completely false. Mara closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she said quietly, "You are lying." Daniel exhaled through his nose. "I am not. You are." "Why would I lie about a random car because you already know who is in it?" Another pause, this one longer. Then he tried a different angle. "Mara, you are doing that thing again." Her jaw tightened. "What thing, jumping to conclusions before you understand the situation?" The phrase slid across the kitchen like something slimy. That thing again. For years, that line had worked. It turned her instincts into symptoms. Her questions into emotional instability, her anger into embarrassment. Mara looked through the blinds again. The girl was walking toward the house. Not fast, not confidently, Just slow, careful steps like someone approaching a door they had imagined opening for a very long time. Mara's pulse started hammering. Daniel, what the girl is walking toward my house. His voice sharpened immediately. Do not open the door. That reaction confirmed everything. Why, just do not. Why? Because it will turn into a mess. The word landed hard. Mess. A girl sleeping in a car all night outside his ex-wife's house was not a mess. It was a secret, and secrets had weight. Mara's voice dropped. Daniel, is that your daughter? For the first time since the call began, he stopped pretending. The silence on the line told her everything. Not confusion, not surprise, recognition. Mara felt the kitchen tilt slightly. 17. She did the math automatically. 17 years old. Older than Owen. Old enough that the timeline slid backward into years when she and Daniel were already together. Already planning things. Already talking about the house they would one day buy. Daniel finally spoke. This is not how I wanted this handled. The sentence hit her like ice water. Not denial, not shock, just inconvenience. Mara felt the humiliation rise hot and violent in her chest. You have a 17-year-old daughter. It is complicated. No, it is not. You hid a child. I did not hide her. What would you call it? Then his voice grew tighter. Her mother made everything impossible. There it was. Always the woman. Always the chaos he claimed to be managing. Mara turned toward the window again. The girl had reached the sidewalk. She stopped there, looking up at the house, like someone rehearsing the courage to knock. Mara spoke quietly. Does Owen know? Daniel answered instantly. No. The speed of it made her stomach twist. You are very sure about that. Because he does not need to know. He does if he has a sister. Half-sister. The correction came automatically. Cold, precise. Mara closed her eyes again. A memory surfaced without permission. Daniel holding her hand at a county fair years ago. Talking about the future. Saying one day he wanted a daughter, someone with your eyes. The humiliation burned, not because he had lied, because she had believed it. Outside, the girl took the last few steps to the walkway. Daniel's voice came again. Listen to me, but do not let her in. Mara felt something inside her go very still. Why? Because you do not know what she wants. Mara laughed once, a short, broken sound. Actually, I think I do. Daniel's voice sharpened. Mara, what? If you open that door, you are creating a problem that cannot be undone. That sentence hung in the kitchen like a threat disguised as advice. Mara looked at the girl again. Up close now, young, exhausted, terrified. And very clearly not there for money. She was there for something much worse. Truth, Mara spoke quietly. Too late. What do you mean? Because she is already here. At that exact moment, 3 soft knocks landed on the side door. Not loud, not aggressive, just careful. Like someone asking permission to ruin a life. Mara walked toward the door. Daniel's voice rose through the phone. Do not open it. Mara reached the handle. Why? Because you are about to regret it. She stopped. Not because of the warning. Because of the sudden clarity that followed it. Daniel was not afraid of the girl. He was afraid of witnesses. Mara unlocked the door. The girl's voice came through the glass, shaking slightly. I know you are in there. Mara pulled the door open halfway. The girl stood on the step with red eyes and wind-tangled hair. Behind her, the blue sedan waited at the curb. The older man inside the driver's seat watched silently. The girl swallowed. Then she said the sentence that shattered the last illusion Mara still had about the past 17 years. I think you might be my dad's ex-wife. Daniel's voice exploded through the phone. Mara. But Mara was no longer listening. because the girl lifted her eyes and said the name, Daniel Mercer. For a few seconds, Mara did not move. The morning air slipped into the kitchen through the half-open door, carrying the cold smell of wet leaves and asphalt. The girl stood on the step, thin shoulders, gray hoodie zipped halfway, dark hair tied back badly, like she had done it in a car mirror. She looked exhausted. Not dramatic, not angry, just someone who had run out of better options. Mara still held the phone in her hand. Daniel's voice was coming through it. Mara. She did not answer. The girl spoke again, quieter this time. My name is Tessa. Mara finally turned away from the doorway, into the kitchen, into the house she had built after Daniel. She lifted the phone to her ear. Your daughter is on my porch. The silence on the other end lasted almost 2 full seconds. Then Daniel said carefully, You should not talk to her. Mara almost laughed. 17 years. And that was the first instruction. Do not talk. She walked back to the door. Tessa had not moved. Behind her, the blue sedan still idled quietly at the curb. An older man sat inside, hands on the steering wheel, watching but not interfering. Mara looked at the girl again. You drove here last night. Yes. You slept in that car. Yes. Why? Tessa hesitated. Then she said something that made Mara's chest tighten. Because if I came in the morning, I thought you might slam the door before hearing me. Daniel's voice cut in through the phone. Mara, listen to me. She spoke into the phone without taking her eyes off the girl. You knew she was coming. No. Another lie. Daniel was good at those. Not dramatic lies, just quick ones. Small enough to sound reasonable if nobody checked. Mara stepped outside onto the porch. The cold wood creaked under her bare feet. The girl straightened slightly. Up close she looked younger than 17. Her eyes were tired in a way teenagers usually were not. What do you want from me? Mara asked. Tessa swallowed. I wanted to know if my mom was telling the truth. The sentence landed quietly, but it landed hard. Behind Mara, the kitchen refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the street, a garage door opened. Normal sounds. Normal morning. And a stranger claiming a place in the middle of it. Mara folded her arms. Your mother said what? That he knew about me. That he always knew. Daniel's voice snapped through the phone again. Do not engage with her. Mara ignored him. Tessa continued. My mom died in January. The words slowed down slightly as she said them. Cancer. Mara felt something in her chest shift. Not sympathy, yet just recognition. Grief had a certain weight when spoken out loud. After she died, Tessa said, my grandpa and I were going through her paperwork. She nodded toward the car. That is him. Mara glanced briefly toward the sedan. The man inside lifted one hand slightly in acknowledgement. Not smiling. Just tired. Tessa continued. We found old court papers, paternity tests, emails, letters from lawyers. My mom kept everything. Daniel spoke sharply in Mara's ear. This is exactly what I warned you about. Warned me about what? A story. Mara stared at the girl. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she was holding a worn manila folder against her chest like something fragile. Stories usually did not come with folders. Daniel lowered his voice. Her mother had a history of exaggeration. Of course she did. The script was familiar. Women exaggerated. Women misunderstood. Women created chaos that men had to manage. Mara looked at Tessa again. How old are you? 17. The number echoed inside Mara's head. 17. Her mind began assembling the timeline automatically. 17 years ago. She and Daniel had already been dating for nearly a year. Already serious. Already talking about moving in together. Already believing they were building something permanent. Her stomach tightened. Did he ever meet you? Mara asked. Tessa shook her head. No. Did he ever acknowledge you? He sent money when I was little. Then he stopped. Why, my mom said he got married. Mara felt the cold spread through her again. She did not need to ask the next question, but she asked anyway. When did the money stop? When I was 5. Mara did the math, 5 years old. That was the year she and Daniel had bought their first house together. The year he told her they needed to tighten spending because of work instability. The year she sold her car to help cover their mortgage. Daniel's voice came through the phone again. Mara, she spoke flatly. You had a daughter while we were together. It was complicated. The same answer, always the same. Tessa opened the folder slowly. Inside were copies of documents, printed emails, a birth certificate, 2 paternity test reports. She handed the top sheet forward. Mara did not take it immediately, because accepting the paper meant accepting the timeline, accepting the possibility that her entire early marriage had been built beside a secret. Finally, she reached out. The paper felt ordinary. Cheap printer ink, legal language, but Daniel Mercer's name sat clearly in the center of the page. Probability of paternity 99.9%. The date printed at the bottom was 17 years old. Mara looked at the second test. 3 years later. Same result. Same name, same man. Daniel's voice was tight now. Those documents are incomplete. She almost admired the audacity, even now. Even with evidence in her hand. He was still trying to adjust the story. Mara lowered the papers. Why did you come here? Tessa answered honestly. Because he told me not to. Mara blinked. What I called him 3 days ago. Daniel's voice went sharp. Mara, Tessa continued. I asked if he wanted to meet me. He asked what I knew. Then he said if I contacted anyone from his past, it would destroy his life. Mara felt the words land slowly inside her chest. Destroy his life. Not meet me. Not I am sorry. Just damage control. Daniel spoke again. You are listening to a very selective version of events. Mara ignored him. Tessa kept going. He said if I came here, you would tell people I was lying, that you hated him, that you were unstable. The last word hung between them. Mara closed her eyes for 1 second. Of course, even now, the script had not changed. If a woman brought evidence, the first defense was always the same. Question her sanity. Mara opened her eyes again. She looked at Tessa. Really looked. The girl's lip was chapped, her sneakers were dusty, her hands were gripping the folder too tightly. She did not look like someone chasing money. She looked like someone chasing confirmation. Mara felt the humiliation rise slowly, not at the girl. At the memory of how long she herself had believed Daniel's calm explanations, how often she had defended him, how many times she had apologized for noticing things that later turned out to be true. Behind them, the older man in the car opened the driver door and stepped out. He walked slowly toward the porch. Careful, respectful, stopping a few feet away. Walter Briggs, he said quietly. Tessa's grandfather. Mara nodded once. He continued, Ma'am, we did not come here to cause trouble. We just needed someone who knew him to tell her whether she is crazy or not. The sentence cut deeper than anything else that morning. Crazy. That word had lived in Mara's house for years. Not spoken directly, just implied, suggested. Woven into arguments until she began doubting the evidence in front of her own eyes. Mara looked at Tessa again. The girl was waiting, not for kindness, just for honesty. Daniel's voice came through the phone one last time. Mara, do not involve yourself in this. That was when Mara finally understood something clearly. Daniel was not afraid of the girl. He was afraid of witnesses. Mara lowered the phone. ended the call. Then she looked back at Tessa and said quietly, "Come inside." Tessa blinked. "Really? Yes. Just you." The girl turned to her grandfather. Walter gave a small nod. "Go ahead." Tessa stepped into the house slowly, like someone entering a place she had imagined for years but never believed she would actually see. The door closed behind her. For the first time since the blue car appeared, Mara understood something unsettling. This was not the beginning of the problem. It was the moment the problem finally arrived where everyone could see it. The door closed behind Tessa with a quiet click. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The kitchen looked exactly the same as it had 30 minutes earlier. Owen's cereal bowl still sat in the sink. The peanut butter jar still waited on the counter. Morning light came through the window in pale stripes across the table. Normal life. Tessa stood near the doorway like she was afraid to touch anything. Mara pointed toward the kitchen table. "Sit." The girl obeyed quickly. She set the folder down carefully, like something inside it might break. Mara remained standing. For a long moment she simply looked at her. 17 years old. Daniel's mouth. Not identical, but enough to make Mara's chest tighten. That realization carried something ugly with it. Jealousy. Not because of Daniel, because of time, because this girl had existed while Mara was building a life that now looked slightly unreal. Mara pushed the thought down. "Show me everything." Tessa opened the folder. Inside were documents layered in careful order. Paternity reports, old emails, court forms that had never been finished. Tessa slid the top page across the table. My mom kept everything. Mara picked it up again. She had already seen the first test outside. Now she noticed the smaller details. Dates, addresses, law office letterheads. The first test had been done 2 months before she and Daniel moved into their first apartment together. Her stomach twisted. "You said he sent money when you were little." Tessa nodded. "Cash, mostly. Through my mom's friend. Why stop? He got married." Mara felt heat rise behind her eyes. So that was the reason. Not financial trouble, not work problems, marriage. Her marriage. She flipped to the emails, printed copies. Daniel's name sat clearly at the top of each page. His tone was familiar, calm, reasonable, detached. One message caught her attention immediately. "You need to stop contacting me at work. I have moved on with my life. I am willing to help quietly if you stop threatening to destroy everything. Destroy everything." Mara stared at that phrase. Her fingers tightened around the paper. Quietly, always quietly. Every lie Daniel had ever told came wrapped in the same request. Keep it quiet, handle it privately, do not make things ugly. Tessa watched her carefully. "Did he do that to you too?" Mara looked up. "Do what?" "Make you feel like everything was your fault for asking questions." The words hit harder than they should have. Mara set the paper down. "Yes." Tessa nodded slowly. "My mom said he would." Silence settled in the kitchen again. Outside, a truck drove past slowly. The blue sedan remained parked across the street. Walter Briggs sat inside watching the house without moving. Mara walked to the sink. Her reflection in the small window above it looked older than she remembered. 41 years old, divorced. Still untangling things that should have been finished long ago. She spoke without turning around. "Why come to me? Because you were married to him. That is not a good reason." Tessa hesitated. Then she said the real answer. "Because my mom said if anyone would understand how he lies, it would be you." The sentence landed quietly, but it carried weight. Mara felt a strange mix of anger and shame twist inside her. Anger at Daniel, shame at how accurate that description was. She turned around slowly. "Did you go to him first?" "Yes." When 3 days ago? What happened? Tessa looked down at her hands. I called him from my grandpa's phone. What did he say? At first he pretended not to understand. That sounded familiar. Then he asked what I knew. Mara crossed her arms, and then he said we could handle it privately. Money, yes. How much? $10,000. Mara let out a quiet breath. The number felt both large and small at the same time. Large enough to buy silence. Small enough to reveal how cheaply Daniel valued consequences. Tessa continued. He said if we contacted anyone from his past, it would make everything worse. Mara almost smiled, because she knew the exact next sentence before Tessa said it. He said you hated him. Of course. He said you would lie to hurt him. Mara laughed once, not a happy sound. And he said I was unstable. There it was, the word that had followed Mara for years. Unstable. It was such a useful label. It made evidence suspicious. It made anger embarrassing. It made the liar look patient and reasonable. Mara sat down slowly across from the girl. Her voice dropped. Did he tell you not to come here? Yes. Why did you come anyway? Tessa met her eyes. Because if my mom was right about him, you would know. For a moment, Mara did not speak. The kitchen clock ticked loudly on the wall. Each second felt strangely heavy. Finally, Mara asked something she had not planned to say. Did he ever meet you? No, not once. Tessa shook her head. Only phone calls when I was little, then nothing. Mara looked down at the papers again. A child. 17 years. And Daniel had managed to avoid meeting her even once. The cruelty of that fact settled slowly in the room. Mara stood abruptly. Tessa tensed immediately. Sorry, the girl said quickly. I should not have come. Mara raised a hand. Stop apologizing for his choices. Tessa went quiet. Mara walked to the pantry. She pulled out a box of granola bars and set it on the table. Eat something. The girl blinked. I am not hungry. Eat anyway. Tessa unwrapped one slowly. Her hands were still shaking slightly. Mara watched her for a moment. Then she spoke carefully. There's something you need to understand. Tessa looked up. Your father is very good at making the truth look messy. The girl nodded once. My mom said that. She said if he could make a room doubt itself long enough, he always won. Mara felt a small, bitter smile appear. Your mom was right. Tessa looked down at the granola bar. Then she asked the question that had been waiting in the room since she arrived. Was he like that when you were married? Mara did not answer immediately, because the real answer was humiliating. Yes, but also worse. He had been like that long before she realized it. She had simply been the last person to notice. Mara leaned back in her chair. Yes. Tessa's shoulders dropped slightly. Not relief, recognition. My mom used to say that too. Say what? That after talking to him you knew something was wrong, but you could not explain exactly what. Mara nodded slowly. That is exactly how it works. The girl looked at the papers again. Then she asked softly, So what happens now? Mara looked toward the window. The blue sedan was still there. Walter Briggs waiting patiently in the driver's seat. A grandfather who had driven through the night because a teenager needed answers. Mara thought about Daniel, about the years she had spent untangling his lies after the divorce, about how carefully he controlled every story that involved him. Then she made a decision that surprised even her. We go see a lawyer. Tessa blinked. Now, yes. Why? Because the only way to deal with someone like your father is with witnesses. The girl stared at her. You would do that. Mara held her gaze. Your father spent 17 years hoping nobody would compare notes. She stood up and grabbed her keys from the counter. I think it is time we start comparing notes. Outside, the sedan door opened. Walter stepped out as Mara and Tessa walked toward the driveway. He studied Mara carefully. "Everything okay?" Mara nodded once. "No, but it is about to be." Walter glanced at Tessa. "Where are we going?" Mara answered before the girl could. "To a lawyer." Walter's eyebrows lifted slightly. That was quick. Mara looked back at the house for a moment. At the kitchen window. At the quiet street where the blue car had waited all night. Then she said something she had not fully realized until that moment. Secrets survive because nobody wants to be the first person to make them public. She opened the car door. Today is not that day. The drive to the diner took 12 minutes. Mara did not remember most of them. The road curved past familiar places she had driven by hundreds of times. A gas station with faded banners. A dentist office with cartoon teeth painted on the window. A small park where Owen had learned to ride a bike. Everything looked normal. Too normal. It felt wrong that the world could remain exactly the same while something this large was unfolding quietly inside it. Walter's blue sedan pulled into the diner parking lot ahead of her. The place had been there for decades. Cracked asphalt, faded red sign. 2 pickup trucks parked near the entrance. Mara chose it because diners allowed people to sit without explaining themselves. No one asked questions if you stayed too long. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and frying oil. A waitress with tired eyes and a name tag that said Carol pointed them to a booth near the back. Tessa slid into the seat beside her grandfather. Mara sat across from them. Carol poured coffee without asking. "You folks want breakfast." Walter ordered eggs. Mara ordered toast she knew she would not touch. Tessa shook her head. The waitress studied the table for half a second, reading tension the way experienced servers did. Then she walked away. For a moment, no one spoke. The diner hummed quietly around them. Dishes clinking, low conversation from another table, the distant buzz of the kitchen grill. Walter finally broke the silence. "Ma'am, I want you to know we did not come here looking for trouble." Mara nodded. "I believe you." He looked relieved. Tessa stared down at the table. Mara noticed something then. A small bruise fading yellow on the girl's wrist. Probably nothing. Maybe she had bumped it on something. Still, the sight bothered her. Walter leaned forward slightly. Her mother tried to deal with this the right way years ago. Court papers, lawyers, tests. Mara had already seen the evidence. What happened? She got tired of fighting him, of fighting hospitals, of fighting bills. His voice tightened. Cancer makes a lot of battles feel pointless. Tessa stared straight ahead. She never stopped believing he should acknowledge me. Mara folded her hands. "Did she ever try again after you got older once?" "When I was 14. "What happened?" Tessa answered quietly. "He sent money. That was it." "Yes." "How much? A few thousand?" Mara felt her jaw tighten. Daniel always believed money solved emotional problems. Not because it worked, because it was efficient. Tessa continued. "Yesterday he offered 10,000. For what? For me to sign something saying I would not pursue anything legally." Walter added, "and a statement saying she could not verify the paternity paperwork anymore since her mother was gone." Mara almost laughed. The arrogance of it. He wanted the evidence erased. $10,000 for 17 years of silence. Tessa looked embarrassed. "I did not take it." Mara met her eyes. "I know. Walter's food arrived. He barely touched it." Mara pushed the toast around on her plate. Then she asked the question that had been forming in her head since the kitchen. Why now? Tessa frowned. "What? Why did you come here specifically?" The girl hesitated, and then she answered honestly, "Because he was afraid I would." Walter looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "When I called him," Tessa said, He did not sound scared until I mentioned your name. Mara felt the words land slowly. He said you were dangerous. Of course he did. He said if I talked to you, you would twist everything. Mara let out a small breath. That was the version of her Daniel had been selling for years. Unstable, vindictive, dangerous. Labels were easier than truth. Tessa looked confused. Why would he think that Mara took a sip of coffee? Because I stopped believing him. The girl studied her carefully, and that was enough. For him, yes. Walter wiped his hands on a napkin. I have met men like him, the kind who think the problem is whoever stops cooperating with the lie. Mara nodded. That sounded exactly right. Tessa leaned forward slightly. There's something else. Mara waited. 3 days ago when I called him. Yes. He asked what I knew, and when I mentioned the tests, he got quiet. That made sense. Then he asked one strange question. What question? He asked if I had talked to you yet. Mara felt the back of her neck tighten. Even then, he was managing damage. Tessa continued. When I said no, he told me not to. What exactly did he say? Tessa repeated it carefully. He said if I went near you, it would turn into a mess. The same word he had used on the phone earlier, mess. Mara leaned back in the booth. For years, Daniel had used that word whenever the truth threatened to become public. Arguments were messes. Questions were messes. Account statements were messes. Anything that exposed him was automatically chaos someone else had created. Walter finally spoke again. What happens at this lawyer meeting? Mara answered honestly. I do not know yet. Tessa looked nervous. Do you think he will show up? Yes. Why? Because Daniel always believes he can control the room. Walter gave a small, humorless smile. Some men never realize the room has changed. Mara looked at Tessa again. The girl looked exhausted. 17 years old, dead mother, a folder of proof, and a father who had spent nearly 2 decades avoiding eye contact. Mara felt the first real wave of sympathy arrive, not the distant kind, the uncomfortable kind. Because sympathy meant admitting this girl had been hurt by the same man who had once promised Mara a life together. The waitress returned. More coffee. Mara nodded. Carol refilled the mugs. Then she looked at Tessa. Honey, you sure you do not want anything to eat? The girl hesitated. Then she shook her head again. I am okay. Carol studied her for half a second. Then she said something simple. Well, if you change your mind, the pancakes are good today. She walked away. The small kindness lingered. Tessa stared down at the table again. My mom used to bring me here when I was little. Mara looked around the diner. Same place, yes. Walter smiled faintly. Back when she was working double shifts. Tessa continued quietly. She said one day my dad might come through that door. The sentence hung there, heavy, naive, painfully hopeful. Mara swallowed. Did he know? Walter's fork scraped lightly against the plate. After a moment, he said, Your mom believed people should be given the chance to do the right thing. Mara nodded slowly. It sounded like a woman who had believed Daniel's explanations longer than she should have. Just like Mara once had. Tessa looked at her. Do you regret marrying him? The question was blunt. 17-year-olds often were. Mara did not answer immediately. She thought about the years, the house, the promises, the lies, the divorce. Owen. Finally, she said the only honest answer she had. I regret believing him after the first time he showed me who he was. Tessa nodded quietly. My mom used to say the same thing. Walter pushed his plate away. So, lawyer at 11, yes. He checked his watch. Then he looked at Mara again. You sure you want to get pulled into this? Mara thought about Daniel, about the phone call that morning, about the way he'd already begun trying to shape the story. Then she thought about the girl sitting across from her. 17 years old, holding a folder that should never have been necessary. Mara answered simply, "Your granddaughter spent the night in a car because she thought I might understand the truth about her father." Walter watched her carefully, and I think she deserves to find out she was right. Naomi Feld's office sat above a dental clinic and a tax service in a quiet brick building 2 blocks off the courthouse square. Mara had been there once before, the day she signed the final divorce papers. Back then, the stairs had felt heavy. Today, they felt different. Not lighter, just clearer. Walter parked the blue sedan beside Mara's car. Tessa climbed out slowly, gripping the manila folder like a shield. "You ready?" Walter asked. "No," she said. "Good answer," he replied. Inside the building, the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old carpet. A receptionist with sharp glasses looked up from behind the desk. Name Mara Ellison. The woman checked her screen. "Miss Feld is expecting you down the hall, second door." Naomi Feld's office had not changed. Same neat desk, same shelves of thick legal books, same window overlooking the courthouse lawn. Naomi herself stood when they entered. Mid-50s. Gray streak through dark hair. Sharp eyes that had seen every kind of lie people tried to bring into her office. "Mara," she said. "Naomi." Naomi glanced at the others. "And these must be the reason you sounded like someone had set your morning on fire." "Walter Briggs," Walter said, extending his hand. "My granddaughter, Tessa." Naomi shook both hands quickly. Then she gestured toward the chairs. "Sit. No small talk, no polite warm-up." That was one of the reasons Mara trusted her. The folder landed on Naomi's desk. Naomi opened it. She did not rush. She read each document carefully. The room stayed silent except for the faint turning of pages. After several minutes, Naomi leaned back. Interesting. That word meant trouble when it came from a lawyer. Tessa shifted nervously. "Is it bad?" Naomi looked at her. "Bad for who?" "For me, no. For your father." "Probably." Walter crossed his arms. "Good." Naomi continued reading. Then she tapped one of the pages. "You said he offered $10,000 yesterday." "Yes," Tessa said, verbally yes. "Witnesses." "Just my grandfather." Naomi nodded. "Still useful." She looked at Mara next. "Did he contact you today?" "Yes, phone call." "What did he say? He warned me not to talk to her." Naomi wrote something down. "Expected." She tapped the paternity report. "These tests are valid. Even at this age, they are strong evidence." Tessa leaned forward. "So, he cannot deny it." "He already has not." Tessa blinked. "What do you mean?" Naomi turned the email printout toward her. "When a man says he is willing to help quietly if the mother stops threatening to destroy everything, he is acknowledging something. Responsibility, fear, and knowledge." Walter nodded slowly. "Makes sense." Naomi closed the folder. "Here's the situation." She looked at Tessa. "Legally, he is your father, even if he tried to avoid formal support in the past. What does that mean for me now? It means you can pursue financial support for education. You can request medical history, and you can formally establish paternity in court." Tessa looked overwhelmed. Walter placed a hand on her shoulder. Naomi continued, "But that is only part of the picture." She looked at Mara now. "The more interesting question is what he hid during your marriage." Mara felt her stomach tighten again. "Explain." "If he was making off-record payments to avoid legal acknowledgement, that money had to come from somewhere." Mara understood immediately. "Accounts, transfers, hidden income." Naomi nodded as if reading her thoughts. "Men who hide children tend to hide other things too." Walter let out a quiet whistle. Naomi folded her hands. "Did he disclose anything like this during your divorce proceedings?" "No." "Did you ever suspect another child?" "Never." Naomi leaned back in her chair. Then he lied on financial disclosures. Mara felt the words hit slowly. Not shocking, just confirmation. Tessa looked between them. What does that mean? It means, Naomi said calmly, your father's life is about to get more complicated. The door behind them clicked softly. Naomi's assistant stepped in. Sorry to interrupt. Naomi looked up. Yes, someone is here asking for you. Who? Daniel Mercer. The room went very still. Walter's jaw tightened immediately. That was fast. Mara felt a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. Of course, Daniel had moved quickly. He always did. Control the narrative, get ahead of the story. Naomi did not look surprised. Did he say why he is here? He said it is urgent. Naomi glanced at Mara. Did you tell him you were coming here? No. Walter leaned forward. Then how did he know? Naomi answered calmly. Because men like him monitor situations very carefully when secrets are involved. She stood. Tell him I will see him in 15 minutes. The assistant nodded and left. Tessa looked pale. He is here, yes. Her hands started shaking again. I do not want to see him alone. You will not be alone, Naomi said. Walter's voice hardened. He better not try anything. Naomi smiled slightly. He will try something. That is guaranteed. The question is what? She walked around the desk and leaned against the front of it. Let me explain how this is going to work. Everyone listened. Daniel believes he can control conversations. That is his main skill. Tessa nodded slowly. Yes, he'll try 3 things today. Naomi held up a finger. First, he will minimize the situation. Say it is complicated. Say there were misunderstandings. Say everyone is emotional. Second finger. Second, he'll try to isolate the conversation. He will want to talk privately with one person at a time. Third finger. Third, he will make someone look unreasonable. Usually the woman asking questions. Mara almost smiled. That part was very familiar. Naomi looked at her. Your job is simple. Why do not argue with him? Tessa looked confused. Why? Because arguments are where he wins. What do we do then? Let him talk. Walter frowned. That sounds backwards. No. Naomi's eyes sharpened. People who lie depend on momentum. The more they talk, the more contradictions appear. Tessa swallowed. What if he denies everything? Naomi tapped the folder. Then we show him the paperwork. Mara felt her pulse starting to rise again. Daniel was in the building, a few doors away, probably rehearsing explanations, probably assuming he could still steer the situation. Naomi looked at Tessa again. One more thing. Yes. What do you want from him? Tessa blinked. I told you, support for school, acknowledgement, medical history. Naomi nodded. Good. But there's one more thing you might want. What a sentence. Tessa looked confused. Naomi spoke clearly. You want him to say out loud that you are his daughter. The room went silent, because suddenly the real emotional center of the situation was visible. Not money. Recognition. Tessa's eyes filled with tears she tried quickly to hide. Yes, she said quietly. Naomi checked her watch. Then she closed the folder. Good. Let us see if he is brave enough to say it. From the hallway came the faint sound of footsteps. Daniel Mercer was walking toward the office. For the first time since the blue car appeared that morning, Mara realized something important. Today would not be the day the truth began. It would be the day Daniel ran out of places to hide it. Daniel Mercer stepped into Naomi Feld's office like a man entering a business negotiation. Calm, controlled, gray coat, clean shoes. His eyes moved quickly around the room, assessing everyone in less than a second. First Naomi, then Mara, then Walter. Finally, Tessa. He stopped there, the smallest pause. Not shock, recognition. Tessa did not look away. Naomi spoke first. "Mr. Mercer." Daniel nodded slightly. "Miss Feld." His voice carried the careful politeness he used whenever witnesses was present. "I assume Mara contacted you." Naomi gestured toward the chairs. "Sit down." Daniel sat slowly. He folded his hands on the table. For a moment no one spoke. Then Naomi began. "Let us start with something simple." Daniel waited. "Do you deny that Tessa Briggs is your biological daughter?" Daniel exhaled quietly. The first strategy, minimize. It was visible. This situation is more complicated than that question suggests. Naomi did not react. "Do you deny it?" Daniel glanced briefly at Mara, then back to Naomi. "No." Tessa's fingers tightened around the edge of the chair. Naomi wrote something down. "Good. Now we can move forward honestly." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. "I did not say that. You acknowledged paternity. That is sufficient for the moment." Walter leaned back in his chair. "About time." Daniel ignored him. Instead, he turned toward Tessa. "You should have contacted me privately." Tessa's voice came out shaky but clear. "I did. You escalated it unnecessarily. I asked you to meet me." Daniel's jaw tightened, "And I offered to resolve things responsibly." $10,000, Walter said. Daniel glanced at him, a gesture of goodwill. Naomi looked up from her notes, in exchange for silence. Daniel remained calm, in exchange for avoiding unnecessary conflict. Tessa spoke again. "You asked me to sign something saying I cannot verify the paternity papers." Daniel turned back to Naomi. "You see what I mean. Emotions are running high." Naomi leaned back in her chair. Strategy number 2, isolation. He was trying to frame Tessa as emotional, trying to make himself look reasonable. She interrupted him smoothly. "Mr. Mercer, let us stay with facts." Daniel nodded politely. "Of course. You acknowledge paternity, yes. You made informal payments in the past, yes. You stopped. Circumstances changed. Meaning you stopped." Daniel did not answer. Naomi continued. "Did you disclose this child during your marriage to Miss Ellison?" Daniel glanced toward Mara again. "No." "Did you disclose this child during your divorce financial proceedings?" Another pause. "No." Walter let out a low whistle. Naomi wrote another note. "So, you concealed a known child during both marriage and financial disclosure." Daniel straightened slightly. "That is an unfair characterization. Is it inaccurate?" Daniel hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Naomi closed the folder. "Good. Now we understand the basic structure." Tessa looked confused. "Structure, yes." Naomi spoke calmly. "Your father hoped this situation would remain separate from the rest of his life." Daniel's voice sharpened slightly. "That is not fair. It is factual." Walter spoke again. "You never even met the girl." Daniel turned to him. "Her mother made that difficult." Tessa shook her head immediately. "No, she did not." Daniel looked at her. "Tessa." She waited. "For 17 years you never once tried to meet me." The room went quiet. Daniel's composure slipped slightly. "You do not understand the circumstances." "Then explain them." He did not. Instead, he shifted in his seat. Mara watched him carefully. For years, that silence had confused her. Today, it did not. It was not confusion. It was calculation. Daniel spoke again. "I was trying to avoid harming multiple families." Walter laughed bitterly. "You mean protecting yourself?" Daniel ignored him. Naomi tapped the table lightly. "Mr. Mercer, one more question." Daniel looked at her. "Did you describe Miss Ellison as unstable and vindictive when speaking with Tessa?" Daniel's eyes flicked briefly toward Mara. "Context matters," meaning yes. Daniel sighed. "I may have used those words." Mara felt something unexpected. Not anger, relief, because the word was finally sitting in a room where other people could hear it. not whispered in private arguments, not used as a weapon in quiet conversations. Just said out loud. Naomi nodded. "Thank you." She looked at Tessa. "Do you have a question for your father?" The girl hesitated. Then she asked the only question that really mattered. "Why did you never meet me?" Daniel shifted again. "Tessa," she waited. "Your mother created a hostile situation." The girl's voice rose. "She worked 2 jobs and died before she got to stop being tired." Walter placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Daniel tried again. "I was trying to minimize damage. To who?" Daniel looked at the table. No answer came. Naomi spoke quietly. "Mr. Mercer, your daughter would like a simple statement." Daniel frowned slightly. "What statement? Say it clearly." He looked confused. "Say what?" Naomi gestured towards Tessa. "That she is your daughter." Daniel's expression hardened slightly. "That has already been established. Not like that." Daniel looked at Mara again. For support, for hesitation, for the version of her that used to defend him. She gave him nothing. Tessa spoke softly. "I just want you to say it." The room held still. Finally, Daniel turned towards her. His voice was controlled. "Yes, you are my daughter." The sentence landed awkwardly. Late, thin, but it existed. Tessa's face twisted slightly. Not joy, something closer to exhaustion. Because hearing the truth after 17 years did not feel like victory. It felt like confirmation of everything she already knew. Naomi closed the folder. "Good. Now we can proceed legally." Daniel stood. "This is not over." Naomi looked at him calmly. "Correct. It has barely begun." Daniel turned toward the door. Then he paused beside Mara. "You always did enjoy chaos more than you admit." Mara looked at him. For the first time all day she felt completely calm. "No." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Then what?" "I just stopped protecting your lies." Daniel left without another word. The door closed. Silence returned to the room. Walter exhaled slowly. "Well, that went about how I expected." Tessa stared at the table. Naomi stood. "We will file paperwork this week." Walter nodded. "Thank you." Naomi shook her head. "Thank me when he signs something." Tessa stood slowly. She looked at Mara. "You did not have to do this," Mara answered honestly. "I did. Why?" Mara thought for a moment. Then she said the simplest truth she had discovered that day. Because secrets survive when everyone agrees to stay polite. Tessa nodded quietly. Walter placed a hand on his granddaughter's shoulder. Ready to go, they walked out together. Outside, the sky had turned gray with evening. The parking lot was quiet. Walter opened the car door. Tessa paused beside Mara. "Thank you for not making me feel crazy." Mara felt that sentence land deep inside her chest. Because that had always been the worst part of Daniel. Not the lies. The way he made other people doubt their own reality. She answered softly. "You were never crazy." Tessa nodded. Then she got into the car. Walter started the engine. The blue sedan pulled slowly out of the lot and disappeared into the evening traffic. Mara stood there a moment longer. The day had begun with a strange car outside her house. It had ended with something much heavier. The truth finally sitting where everyone could see it. Not clean, not easy, but real. And sometimes that was the most important reversal of all, because the most humiliating thing was never being wrong. It was helping someone else pretend their lie was the truth. Mara turned towards her car. For the first time that day, she felt something close to peace. Not because the story was finished, but because it had finally started being told. Daniel did not leave the building immediately after the meeting. Mara noticed that first. Through Naomi's office window, she saw him standing near the courthouse lawn, phone pressed to his ear, walking slowly back and forth like a man calculating damage. That was always his real talent. Not lying, managing the aftermath of lies. Naomi finished typing something on her laptop. You should expect him to move quickly now. Mara turned from the window. What kind of move? Containment. Walter looked confused. Meaning he will try to control the story before the truth spreads. Tessa shifted in her chair. How? Naomi closed the laptop. By making you look unreasonable. Mara almost smiled. That was familiar territory. Naomi continued. Expect calls, expect offers, expect pressure. Walter frowned. Pressure how? Naomi answered calmly. Men who rely on reputation often try to convince people that exposing the truth is worse than the truth itself. Tessa stared down at the table. My mom used to say that. Naomi nodded. Your mother was correct. Mara's phone buzzed. Daniel, of course. She looked at Naomi. Answer it. Why? Because people like him reveal more when they think they still have influence. Mara answered. What? Daniel's voice sounded tight. You are turning this into something ugly. Mara leaned against the desk. No, I am letting it exist. You are dragging strangers into our private life. Your daughter is not a stranger. Silence. Then Daniel changed tactics. This will affect Owen. There it was, the familiar pressure point. Mara's chest tightened slightly, but this time she recognized it. You mean the truth will affect him? I mean conflict will affect him. Conflict existed the moment you hit a child. Daniel exhaled slowly. You always see things in the most damaging way. Mara laughed softly. No, I just stopped seeing them in the most convenient way. He paused. Then came the next move. How much money does she want? Tessa heard the question through the phone speaker. Her face flushed immediately. Naomi raised one hand gently. Let him talk. Mara answered calmly. She wants recognition. Daniel scoffed. Recognition does not pay bills. Tessa stood up. Her voice shook. I did not ask you for money. Daniel ignored her. Mara spoke slowly. You offered 10,000. Another pause. That was a gesture, no. That was a purchase attempt. Daniel's voice hardened. You are enjoying humiliating me. The accusation landed flat. For years, it would have worked. Today, it sounded small. Mara answered quietly. You humiliated yourself. She ended the call. The office stayed silent. Walter finally shook his head. That man really believes the problem is the person who caught him. Naomi nodded. That belief has worked for him a long time. Tessa looked at the floor. Do people like him ever change? Naomi answered honestly. Not usually. Then why help me? Naomi looked at her. Because truth changes situations even when it does not change people. Mara looked out the window again. Daniel had disappeared, which meant he was already working on his next move. The financial documents arrived 2 days later. Naomi called Mara immediately. You should come in. Is it bad? Interesting. That word again. Mara arrived 20 minutes later. Tessa and Walter were already there. Naomi slid a stack of printed bank records across the table. These accounts were not disclosed during your divorce. Mara flipped through the pages. Transfers, withdrawals, private payments, some small, some larger. Dates stretched across more than a decade. Her stomach slowly tightened. He was paying someone. Yes? Tessa looked confused. Who? Naomi tapped one page. The payments align with the years your mother said he provided support. Walter leaned forward, so he did help. Naomi shook her head slightly. Not legally, not consistently, just enough to keep things quiet. Mara scanned the numbers again. Then she noticed something else. These transfers stopped 3 years before our divorce. Correct? Why? Naomi slid another document across the table. Because he moved the money somewhere else. Where? Naomi looked directly at Mara, an investment account under a different name. Mara read the name slowly. Daniel Mercer Jr. Trust. Her chest tightened. That account belonged to Owen. Naomi nodded. Your son. Tessa went still. Walter leaned back slowly. Let me understand something. He stopped paying support to one child and moved money to another. That is one interpretation. Mara felt something sharp move through her chest. Not anger, something worse. Clarity. Daniel had not simply hidden a daughter. He had redistributed responsibility, quietly, conveniently, without telling anyone. Tessa spoke softly. So he chose. Mara looked at her. Yes. Walter muttered something under his breath. Naomi folded her hands. This changes leverage significantly. How? Financial concealment during divorce proceedings is taken seriously. Mara stared at the paperwork. Years of small, careful decisions, each one designed to protect Daniel's image, each one leaving someone else to carry the cost. Tessa spoke quietly. My mom used to say something like this would happen. Mara looked at her. What did she say? That lies get heavy. Eventually, someone has to carry the weight. Mara nodded slowly. This time, it was Daniel's turn. That night, Mara did not sleep. The house was quiet. Owen had gone to bed hours earlier. The neighborhood was dark. Mara sat at the kitchen table staring at the bank statements Naomi had copied for her. Numbers, dates, transfers, the evidence of a life she had not fully understood while living inside it. Her phone buzzed once. Lena, her sister. I heard something strange today. Mara sighed. Of course. Small towns circulated rumors quickly. What? Someone said Daniel might have another child. Mara stared at the message. Then she typed, yes. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. Then came the reply. Mara, are you sure? The familiar doubt, even now. Mara typed back slowly. I have the paperwork. Another pause. Then Lena wrote, I am sorry. Mara looked at the phone. For years, that sentence would have felt comforting. Tonight, it felt small. Because apologies arrived easily after the truth became undeniable. She set the phone down. Then she walked to the window. Across the street, the curb sat empty. No blue sedan. No waiting strangers. Just quiet. The same street where everything had changed. Mara thought about Tessa sleeping in that car. About the years her mother had spent fighting a quiet battle. About Daniel's careful, calm voice explaining everything away. And about the moment Mara almost stayed inside that morning. Almost left the door closed. If she had done that, the truth would still exist. But it would still be alone. That realization hit her harder than anything else, because the real humiliation had never been Daniel's lies. It had been how long those lies survived because people were afraid to look directly at them. Mara picked up the paperwork again. Tomorrow, Naomi would begin formal filings. Daniel would fight. Lawyers would argue. Stories would spread. It would become messy. Exactly the thing he feared most. Mara turned off the kitchen light. As she walked toward the stairs, she realized something surprising. For the first time since the blue car appeared, she did not feel afraid, just clear. Sometimes the worst moment in a life is not when the truth appears. It is the moment you realize how close you came to ignoring it. And this time, she had not. The first consequence arrived faster than Mara expected. Not a court notice, not a legal letter, a phone call. 2 days after the meeting in Naomi's office, Mara was standing in the kitchen helping Owen with homework when her phone buzzed. Naomi. Mara stepped onto the porch to answer. What happened? Naomi's voice was calm, which usually meant something interesting had just occurred. Mr. Mercer has retained counsel. That was expected. He is also requesting an emergency settlement meeting. Mara leaned against the railing. That was fast. Yes. Why? Naomi paused. Because we requested his financial disclosures this morning. Mara felt a slow tightening in her chest. And, Naomi continued, it appears several payments were made over the years through accounts that were never disclosed during your divorce. There it was. Exactly what Naomi predicted. Hidden money, hidden responsibilities, hidden stories. Mara closed her eyes for a second. How much? We do not know yet, but enough that his attorney called within an hour. Inside the house, Owen was arguing with his math worksheet. Mara listened to the sound for a moment. The ordinary noise of a child who still believed adults generally told the truth. Then she asked quietly, "What happens next?" Naomi answered, "He wants to negotiate, of course he did." Men like Daniel always preferred negotiation to exposure. Mara looked down the quiet street. The same curb where the blue sedan had waited. The same place where everything started 2 mornings ago. "And Tessa," Naomi replied immediately. "She will be present." Mara nodded slowly. Good. Because if Daniel wanted to control the room again, he was going to have to do it with every witness present this time. And that was a much harder trick. The second meeting took place a week later, same office, same table, but the room felt different. Daniel arrived with a lawyer this time. Tall, expensive suit, professional smile, the kind of attorney who specialized in damage containment. Naomi did not bother with pleasantries. "Mr. Mercer wishes to resolve the matter quickly." Daniel's lawyer spoke smoothly. "My client would like to provide educational support for Miss Briggs. Defined support. Full tuition coverage for a radiology technician program." Walter looked surprised. Tessa blinked. Daniel stared at the table. Naomi nodded slowly. And a formal acknowledgement of paternity. And Daniel's lawyer hesitated. Medical history access. Walter leaned back. About time. Naomi glanced at Tessa. "How do you feel about that?" The girl looked overwhelmed. I did not expect him to agree. Daniel finally spoke. "I am agreeing because it is the responsible thing to do." Walter almost laughed again. But he did not, because the result mattered more than the speech. Naomi turned to Mara. "Any objections?" Mara shook her head. "No." Daniel glanced at her. His expression was strange, not angry, not defeated, just tired. For the first time, Mara saw something different in his face. Not power, consequence. Tessa finally spoke. "I have one condition." Everyone looked at her. She swallowed. "I want you to tell Owen." Daniel stiffened immediately. "That is unnecessary." Tessa did not move. "He deserves to know he has a sister." Silence filled the room. Walter watched Daniel closely. Naomi said nothing. Mara waited. Finally, Daniel exhaled slowly. "Fine. But we do it carefully." Tessa nodded once. That was all she wanted, not revenge. Just recognition. Naomi closed the folder. "Then we have an agreement." 3 weeks later, the blue sedan returned to Mara's street. But this time it did not sit there all night. It pulled into the driveway. Owen stood on the porch beside Mara. He shifted nervously. "Mom, yes. Is this the sister?" Mara nodded. "Yes." The car door opened. Tessa stepped out. She looked different, still nervous, still thin, but standing a little straighter. Walter followed behind her. Owen walked halfway down the path. "Hi." Tessa smiled awkwardly. "Hi." They looked at each other for a moment, 2 teenagers connected by a man who had spent years pretending the connection did not exist. Owen scratched the back of his neck. "Dad said we met once. At a park." Tessa nodded. "Yeah, I remember." He smiled slightly. "I thought you looked familiar." Mara watched them quietly. The strange thing was how normal the moment felt. No drama, no shouting, just two kids trying to understand a new piece of reality. Walter leaned beside Mara on the porch. Funny how life works. Mara nodded. Yes. Inside the house, Owen showed Tessa his trumpet. They argued about music for 10 minutes. Then they laughed. It sounded like any other afternoon. Walter finally left. Tessa stood near the driveway before getting back into the car. Thank you. Mara shook her head. You did the hard part. No. Tessa looked at the house. You opened the door. Mara thought about that morning again. The blue car, the hesitation, the moment she almost stayed inside. Sometimes the biggest turning point in a life was very small. Just walking across the street, just opening a door. Just deciding that silence was no longer acceptable. Tessa got into the car. The sedan pulled away slowly. Owen came back outside a few minutes later. Mom. Yes. He looked confused. Why did nobody tell me I had a sister? Mara thought for a moment before answering, because sometimes people are more afraid of the truth than the lie. He nodded slowly. Then he said something that made Mara smile. Well, I am glad she knocked. Mara looked down the street where the blue car had once waited all night. So am I, because the worst humiliation was never discovering the truth. The worst humiliation was helping someone pretend the truth did not exist. And this time, that was finally over.